The Alpha heir's scream split the night like a blade through silk. One moment, Alpha Darius stood before the assembled Silvercrest pack, his hand raised to mark Seraphina's throat and seal their bond. The next, his son's piercing wail shattered the sacred ceremony, sending a ripple of unease through 300 witnesses. Darius froze, his canines already extended. Seraphina's eyes flashed with annoyance before she smoothed her expression into concern. But the damage was done. Kieran's cries grew more frantic, more desperate, echoing off the ancient stones of the ceremonial circle. "Someone get the child," Seraphina hissed through a perfect smile, her voice pitched low enough that only those nearest the altar could hear. But Kieran was already there, clutched in his nursemaid's trembling arms. The woman looked terrified, sweat beading on her forehead as the toddler thrashed against her hold. "My Alpha, I'm so sorry," she stammered. "He was fine. He was sleeping, and then—" Kieran's screams intensified. Not the ordinary tantrum of a 2-year-old, but something wilder, primal. His small body arched backward, and the nursemaid nearly dropped him. Darius moved with wolf speed, catching his son before the woman's grip failed completely. The moment Kieran landed in his father's arms, the screaming changed. Not quieter, but different, reaching, searching for something just beyond his grasp. "Shh, little wolf," Darius murmured, but the endearment sounded hollow even to his own ears. Kieran had never responded to him. Not once in the 2 years since his birth, since his mother's death. The pack healer rushed forward, her weathered hands glowing with diagnostic magic. She pressed her palms to the child's forehead, and Kieran's screams turned to shrieks. "He's not in pain, Alpha," she said, bewildered. "His wolf is awake and calling. I've never seen anything like it in one so young." "Calling for what?" Seraphina's voice was sharp now, her political mask slipping. The alliance her family had built with the Silvercrest pack depended on this ceremony, on her becoming lunar tonight. The healer shook her head helplessly. Around them, the pack began to murmur. The full moon hung heavy and red overhead, a blood moon the elders had called it, an omen. Kieran's cries shifted again, not screaming now, but whimpering. His tiny hands opened and closed, reaching toward the crowd with heartbreaking desperation. Darius followed his son's gaze, but saw only the assembled pack, warriors in their ceremonial leathers, elders draped in silver, the Beta families dressed in their finest, all of them staring at their Alpha with varying degrees of concern. And was that pity? He couldn't bear it, couldn't bear the weight of their watching eyes, couldn't bear his son's suffering, couldn't bear the ghost of Elena that haunted every corner of his life. "Perhaps we should postpone," the head elder began. "No." Seraphina's voice cut through the chaos like winter wind. "The blood moon comes once in a generation. If we don't complete the ceremony tonight, it will be seen as weakness. The Blackridge pack already circles our borders like vultures." She was right. Darius knew she was right. But Kieran's whimpers were like claws in his chest. Then, from the back of the crowd, someone moved. Mara had learned to make herself invisible after 3 years living in a shack at the pack's outskirts, surviving on scraps and the occasional rabbit she could catch. Invisibility was survival. She'd only come tonight because she was still technically pack, exiled but not expelled, and absence from an Alpha's mating ceremony was punishable by death. She'd planned to stand in the shadows, pay her respects, and disappear before anyone remembered the Omega who'd murdered their Luna with cursed hands. But Kieran's cries pulled at something deep in her chest, something that had been sleeping since the night Eleanor died, since the night they dragged Mara from the birthing room with blood on her hands and accusations in the air. "Stop," she told herself. "This isn't your concern. You touch that child, and they'll kill you." But the child's desperate reaching was aimed directly at her section of the crowd. She could see it now, his small fingers opening and closing, his grey eyes fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. "No," she whispered. "Please, not this." The mark on her wrist burned. The crescent-shaped scar she'd woken with the morning after Elena's death. The one she kept hidden beneath leather cuffs. It pulsed with heat. And before she could think, before she could remember all the reasons this was suicide, her feet were moving. The crowd parted before her without realizing what they were doing. Some unconscious recognition that something significant was happening, something that went beyond pack politics and ceremony. Then someone recognized her. Gods above. It's her, the cursed Omega. Someone stop her before... But Mara was already past the first line of defense, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could feel Darius's eyes snap to her face, could see the precise moment recognition hit him like a physical blow. Mara. Her name in his mouth sounded like gravel and grief. "What are you—" She didn't let him finish, couldn't let herself think about consequences or the murder she'd see in Serafina's eyes. Kieran was reaching for her with both hands now, his whimpers taking on a desperate edge that broke something inside her chest. "I'm sorry," she said, though she wasn't sure if she was apologizing to Darius or the child or the ghost of Elena. "I'm so sorry." She reached for Kieran. The moment her fingers touched his small hand, silence fell like snow. Kieran stopped crying. The sudden absence of his wails was more shocking than the sound itself had been. He stared at Mara with wide grey eyes, Elena's eyes, and then he smiled. Not the vague expression of infant pleasure, but a real smile. Recognition and joy and something that looked impossibly like relief. Then he curled into her arms and began to purr. The sound rippled through the crowd like electricity. Wolves didn't purr. Not even wolf children. It was a sound that belonged to their more distant cousins, the great cats of the southern mountains. But Kieran pressed his face against Mara's collarbone and purred, like his heart would break from happiness. "Impossible," the healer breathed. "In 2 years he's never—" "Get your hands off my son." Darius's voice was winter and violence. His eyes had gone wolf gold. And Mara could see his control hanging by a thread. "You have 5 seconds before I rip you apart." Mara knew she should release the child, should throw herself on the Alpha's mercy and beg for a quick death. But Kieran's small arms had locked around her neck with surprising strength, and the purring had shifted to something deeper. Contentment, the sound of a child who'd finally found home. "He won't let go," she said stupidly, because it was true. When she tried to loosen his grip, Kieran's purring turned to a warning growl, another impossible sound from a 2-year-old throat. "Guards!" Serafina's shriek shattered the stunned silence. "Seize her! That Omega killed our Luna, and now she dares to touch the air." 6 warriors moved as one, but before they could reach Mara, light exploded across the ceremonial circle. It came from Kieran's neck, from a crescent-shaped birthmark that Mara had seen once before, in the birthing room, as Elena took her last breath. The mark blazed silver-white, and an answering fire burned on Mara's wrist. She gasped as her leather cuff fell away, revealing her own crescent scar. The 2 marks pulsed in perfect synchronization, and suddenly Mara could feel Kieran, not just his physical presence, but his emotions. His overwhelming relief at finally finding what he'd been searching for since the moment of his birth. "What is this?" Darius's voice shook. He'd gone very still, the wolf in his eyes watching with predator focus. "What have you done to my son?" "I don't know." Mara's voice came out small and terrified. "I swear, I don't—" "The soul mark," the head elder whispered. Her ancient face had gone pale as death. "By the goddess, it's a soul mark." The word sent a shockwave through the pack. Soul marks were legend, the mark of a true bond, meant to appear only once in 1,000 years, the sign that 2 souls were eternally connected. but soul marks appeared between mates, not between an Omega and a child. "That's impossible," Serafina said flatly. "She's a murderer and an Omega. This is some trick. The marks don't lie." The elder's voice carried centuries of authority. "They're synchronized. The bond is real." Mara stood frozen as 300 pairs of eyes fixed on her. The marks on her wrist and Kieran's neck continued to glow, casting silver shadows across both their faces. The child had finally stopped purring and now simply rested against her shoulder, his breathing deep and peaceful, the sleep of an exhausted toddler who'd finally found safety. Darius took a step toward her, and Mara flinched, but he wasn't looking at her with murder anymore. He was staring at his son with an expression caught between hope and devastation. "He's sleeping," Darius said, and his voice cracked. "He's actually sleeping." Chapter 2. The silence lasted exactly 3 heartbeats before Serafina's voice cut through it like a whip crack. "Execute her. Now." Her words hung in the air, cold and final. The assembled pack stirred, uncertainty rippling through their ranks. Serafina's face had transformed from the serene beauty of a future Luna into something harder, sharper, dangerous. "This Omega," she continued, her voice rising to carry across the ceremonial circle, "has disrupted the sacred mating ceremony. She has used dark magic to bewitch the Alpha's heir. She murdered our Luna 3 years ago, and now she dares to touch the child with her cursed hands." Serafina turned to face the pack, her posture perfect, her expression righteous. "How long will we tolerate this abomination in our midst?" A rumble of agreement moved through parts of the crowd. Mara felt it like a physical thing, the weight of their hatred and fear pressing against her skin. She'd lived with it for 3 years, but never this close. Never when she was standing in the center of their attention with nowhere to hide. Darius stood frozen, his eyes fixed on his sleeping son. Kieran's small chest rose and fell with deep, peaceful breaths. The first peaceful sleep Mara had seen him achieve since birth. The crescent marks on both their bodies had dimmed but still glowed faintly, pulsing in time with their heartbeats. "Alpha," Serafina pressed, moving closer to Darius. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch proprietary. "Give the order. We can complete the ceremony once this disturbance is dealt with." Darius's jaw tightened. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Seize her." The words hit Mara like a physical blow. She'd known they were coming, had known from the moment she'd reached for Kieran that she was signing her own death warrant. But hearing Darius say it, hearing the finality in his tone, made something crack inside her chest. 4 guards moved forward, their hands already reaching for her arms, and Kieran woke up. The sound that came from the toddler wasn't human. It wasn't even fully wolf. It was something in between, a snarl that belonged to a creature caught mid-shift, and it made every wolf in the vicinity freeze with primal instinct. Kieran's small body convulsed in Mara's arms. She watched in horror as his hands began to change, fingers shortening, nails lengthening into claws. Fur rippled across his skin in patches, and his face started to elongate. "Gods above," the healer gasped. "He's shifting, but that's impossible," the head elder finished, her ancient voice shaking. "No child shifts before their 5th year. The wolf isn't strong enough. The body can't contain it." But Kieran was doing it anyway. His small body was caught between forms, and Mara could feel his pain and terror through the bond that connected them. He was hurting himself, tearing himself apart from the inside, and it was because someone was trying to take her away. "Stop!" Mara cried out, clutching Kieran closer even as his partial claws dug into her shoulder. "Please, he's hurting himself." "Stand down," Darius commanded, and the guards froze mid-step. He was staring at his son with an expression Mara couldn't read. Shock and fear, and something that might have been wonder. "Everyone stay back." Serafina made a sound of protest, But Darius silenced her with a look. Slowly, carefully, Mara began to hum. She didn't know where the melody came from. It rose from somewhere deep in her chest, instinctive and ancient. A lullaby without words, the kind that predated language itself. Kieran's snarls softened. His partial shift began to reverse, fur receding, bones sliding back into their proper shapes. Within moments, he was fully human again. His small face pressed against Mara's neck, his breathing ragged but steadying. The pack watched in stunned silence. "Explain this." Darius's voice was dangerously quiet. He wasn't looking at Mara anymore, but at the head elder. "You said it was a soul bond. What does that mean?" The elder stepped forward, her staff clicking against the stone with each movement. She was old enough to remember the last Alpha's father, her face mapped with wrinkles that spoke of centuries of pack history. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of that history. "Soul bonds are rare, Alpha. So rare that most believe them to be myth." She moved closer to Mara and Kieran, her eyes fixed on the glowing marks. They appear when two souls are intrinsically connected, meant to be together across time and fate. The bond cannot be forced or faked, it simply exists, or it doesn't. "But soul bonds form between mates," Seraphina interjected, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Not between an Omega and a child. This is obviously some kind of dark magic." "I've seen a soul bond once before," the elder continued, ignoring Seraphina's interruption. 70 years ago, between twin sisters separated at birth. The bond called them together across 1,000 miles. When they finally met, the marks appeared. She reached out slowly, giving Mara time to flinch away, and touched the glowing crescent on her wrist. "But I've never seen one between a child and an adult. The texts don't speak of such things." "Then it's unnatural," Seraphina pressed. "All the more reason to—" "I've been dreaming of him." The words tumbled out of Mara before she could stop them. Every eye in the circle turned to her, and she felt her courage trying to flee. But Kieran stirred in her arms, and she forced herself to continue. "Since the night he was born, since the night Elena died, I dream of him in danger, drowning in darkness, calling for help. I wake up screaming his name." Darius took a step toward her, his eyes blazing gold. "You dare speak my mate's name? You who killed her with your cursed healing?" "I didn't kill her." Mara's voice shook, but she met his gaze. 3 years of shame and exile and survival had burned away her ability to stay silent. "I tried to save her. I poured everything I had into keeping her alive, and when she died anyway, when I woke up the next morning with this mark on my wrist, I didn't understand. I still don't understand, but I never wanted her dead." "Liar," Seraphina hissed. "Everyone knows what happened. The healers said your magic was tainted, that you—" "The healers weren't there." Mara's interruption shocked even herself. She'd spent 3 years accepting their judgment, their condemnation. But holding Kieran, feeling his trust and his desperate need through their bond, gave her a strength she'd forgotten she possessed. "Only Elena and I were in that room when she died. Only Elena and I know what really happened." "Then tell us." Darius's voice was raw. "Tell us what happened in that room." Mara opened her mouth, but the memory seized her throat. Elena's grey eyes, so like her son's, staring up at her with fierce urgency. Elena's bloodied hand gripping Mara's wrist with impossible strength. Elena's final words, whispered so quietly that Mara had almost missed them. "Promise me you'll protect him, no matter what. Promise me." "I can't," Mara whispered. "Not yet. Not until I understand what the bond means." Darius's control snapped. He moved with wolf speed, his hand closing around Mara's throat, careful not to touch Kieran, but firm enough that she felt the threat of his claws. "You have no right to make demands. You have no right to hold my son. Give him to me now, or I swear—" Kieran's eyes snapped open. The child looked at his father with an expression far too old for his young face, and his small hand came up to rest on Darius's wrist, not pushing away, just touching. It was the first time Kieran had voluntarily touched his father since birth. Darius froze. His hand loosened on Mara's throat, and she saw the naked emotion that crossed his face. Hope and heartbreak tangled together so tightly she couldn't separate them. "Pup," Darius's voice cracked on the word. Can you understand?" Kieran didn't respond with words. Instead, he reached his other hand toward his father's face, palm open. An offering, an invitation. Darius's breath caught. Slowly, as if afraid any sudden movement would shatter the moment, he leaned forward and pressed his forehead against his son's small hand. Mara felt something shift in the bond she shared with Kieran. Not breaking, but expanding, making room. The child's emotions flowed through her with crystal clarity. Love for his father mixed with frustration that he couldn't express himself. Mixed with bone-deep certainty that Mara needed to stay close. "He wants me to stay," Mara said softly. "He needs me to stay. I don't know why, but the bond, it's telling him that I have to be here." Darius pulled back, his eyes searching Mara's face. "You could be lying, using magic to make me see what you want me to see. Then test it." The words came from Elder Thea, who had been watching the exchange with sharp eyes. "Separate them. If the bond is real, the child will suffer. If it's false, nothing will happen." "No." The refusal came from Darius, sharp and immediate. He looked at his son, really looked at him, and seemed to see for the first time how peaceful Kieran appeared in Mara's arms, how the tension that usually tightened the toddler's small body had melted away. "I won't risk hurting him to prove a point." "Then what do you propose?" Serafina's voice was ice. "We cannot simply allow this Omega to—" "I'll make you a deal." Mara surprised herself with the steadiness in her voice. She looked directly at Darius, ignoring Serafina's furious glare and the hostile muttering from the crowd. "Give me 1 lunar cycle. Let me serve as Kieran's bonded caretaker under your protection. In exchange, I'll help you find out the truth about Elena's death." The pack erupted. Voices rose in protest, in shock, in outrage. Serafina's face went white with fury. "You cannot be serious," she spat. "Alpha, this is madness. The Omega is manipulating you? The truth about Elena's death?" Darius's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. He was staring at Mara with an intensity that made her skin burn. "You said you can't tell us what happened. Now you're offering to help find the truth? Which is it? I can't tell you everything, not yet, but I can help you investigate." Mara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. She was bargaining with an alpha who had every reason to hate her, in front of a pack that wanted her dead. But Kieran's small hand had curled into her shirt, and she could feel his trust radiating through their bond. "Elena died because someone wanted her dead. I know that now. I didn't understand it then. But the dreams have shown me. Pieces. Fragments. Someone in this pack wanted your mate gone, and they're still here, still planning. And Kieran is in danger." The words fell like stones into still water. Darius went absolutely still, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "If you're lying to me about this, if you're using my son to spread false accusations—" "I'm not lying." Mara met his gaze steadily. "Put me under guard. Watch me every moment. Cast truth spells if you want. But give me 1 lunar cycle to prove that Kieran and I are connected for a reason, that Elena's death wasn't what everyone thinks, and in exchange, I'll give you my oath. I'll protect your son with my life, and I'll help you find whoever wanted Elena dead." Serafina moved closer to Darius, her hand sliding into his. "My love, you cannot seriously be considering this. Our alliance, the ceremony, can wait." Darius's words were quiet but final. He looked at Serafina. and Mara saw something flash in his eyes, not anger exactly, but a kind of cold assessment. My son just shifted at 2 years old. He's been inconsolable since birth. And now he's sleeping peacefully in the arms of an Omega we exiled. Everything about this situation is impossible. I need to understand why. The blood moon, Serafina started, will come again. Darius pulled his hand from hers, and Mara saw the future Luna's perfect mask crack just slightly. My son comes first. He has always come first. He turned back to Mara, and the full weight of his alpha authority pressed against her like a physical thing. 1 lunar cycle. You'll live in the pack house under constant guard. You'll submit to daily examinations by the healers, and if I find even a hint that you're manipulating my son or using dark magic, you'll execute me yourself, Mara finished. I know, I accept. Then we have an agreement. Darius held out his hand, and Mara stared at it. A deal sealed with an alpha's touch was binding. Breaking it would mean death for both parties. She shifted Kieran to one arm and extended her free hand. The moment their skin made contact, power rippled through the air. The crescent marks on her wrist and Kieran's neck blazed bright enough to cast shadows, and Mara felt the bargain settle into her bones like a brand. 1 lunar cycle. 28 days to prove herself, to protect Kieran, and to uncover a truth that someone had killed to hide. This is a mistake, Serafina said, her voice tight with barely suppressed rage. When this Omega fails, when she hurts your son or uses him against you, remember that I warned you. She turned on her heel and stalked away, her ceremonial robes swirling around her. Several of the Beta families followed, their expressions disapproving. The ceremony was officially ruined. Darius watched them go, his expression unreadable. Then he looked back at Mara and his sleeping son. Come, he said finally. It's a long walk to the pack house and Kieran needs a proper bed. He started toward the path that led away from the ceremonial circle, and after a moment's hesitation, Mara followed. The guards fell into formation around them, less like an escort and more like a prison detail. She could feel their hostile stares boring into her back. Elder Thea's voice stopped them before they'd gone 10 steps. Alpha Darius, there's something you should know. The old woman's expression was grave. I need to consult the ancient texts about soul bonds, but there's one thing I remember from my studies, something the old stories all agreed on. What is it? Darius asked. The elder's gaze moved from Kieran to Mara and back again. In every recorded case of a soul bond between a child and an adult, the bond formed between a child and their true mother. Blood mother or spiritual mother, the texts weren't always clear on the distinction. But the bond doesn't form randomly, Alpha. It forms between a child and the one meant to mother them. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. That's impossible, Darius said flatly. Kieran's mother is dead. She died giving birth to him. I know what the records say. Elder Thea's voice was gentle but firm. I was there when Elena passed. I helped prepare her body for the funeral rites. But the marks don't lie, Alpha. If this bond is real, and everything we've seen tonight suggests it is, then according to every text we have, it means Kieran has recognized Mara as his true mother. Mara's world tilted. That can't be right. I'm not saying you gave birth to him, the elder clarified. But the bond sees something we don't. Some connection between your soul and his that predates this moment. Perhaps even predates his birth. She turned to go, then paused. One more thing. The texts say that breaking a true soul bond is fatal. Not just painful, fatal. For both parties. So whatever you decide to do over the next lunar cycle, Alpha, remember that. If this bond is real, you cannot separate them without killing them both. The elder walked away, leaving her words echoing in the night air. Darius stood frozen for a long moment. Then, without looking at Mara, He started walking again toward the pack house. Mara followed, her mind reeling. Kieran's true mother. The words made no sense. She'd been nothing to Elena except a low-ranking healer called to assist with a difficult birth. She'd never even met the Luna before that terrible night. But as she walked through the hostile crowd, feeling their judgment and hatred pressing against her from all sides, she remembered Elena's final words with perfect clarity. "Promise me you'll protect him, no matter what. Promise me." And the way Elena had gripped her wrist right over the spot where the crescent mark would appear hours later. What had Elena known? What had she seen in those final moments? And why had she chosen Mara, a nobody Omega, with no family and no status, to bind to her son? Mara didn't have answers, but as she felt Kieran's sleeping breath against her neck and the steady pulse of their bond in her chest, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had 28 days to figure it out. 28 days to prove herself. And somewhere in the pack house ahead, someone who had killed once to hide their secrets was already planning to kill again. Chapter 3. The room they gave Mara was small, barely larger than a closet, tucked into the servants' wing of the pack house. A single window overlooked the kitchens, and the walls were bare stone that wept moisture in the early morning hours. It was, she suspected, the worst room in the entire building. A deliberate insult wrapped in the pretense of accommodation. She didn't care. It had a bed, a door that locked, and it was 3 doors down from Kieran's nursery. That was all that mattered. What she hadn't expected was the guard stationed directly outside her door. A rotating shift of warriors who watched her every movement with barely concealed hostility. They followed her to meals, to the bathing rooms, even to Kieran's nursery. Their presence was a constant reminder that she was here on sufferance, one wrong move away from execution. The pack house itself was worse than the guards. On her second morning, she'd woken to find the word murderer scrawled across her door in what looked like blood. It was chicken blood, the kitchen Omega informed her with barely hidden satisfaction, but the message was clear. On the third day, someone spat in her breakfast porridge. The dining hall went silent, waiting to see what she would do. Mara had simply pushed the bowl away and left without eating. The guard at her elbow had smirked. By the end of the first week, Mara had learned to move through the pack house like a ghost, silent, unobtrusive, trying desperately not to provoke anyone. She took her meals in her room, avoided the common areas, and ventured out only to care for Kieran. The child was her only respite from the constant hostility, and he was thriving. "Mara!" The word burst from Kieran's mouth on the 8th morning, clear as a bell and twice as bright. He was sitting on the floor of the nursery, playing with carved wooden wolves when she'd entered for the morning routine. Mara froze in the doorway. Behind her, she heard the guard's sharp intake of breath. "Did he just—" the warrior started. "Mara," Kieran said again, this time pushing himself to his feet and toddling toward her with his arms outstretched. "Mara, Mara!" She dropped to her knees and caught him, her throat tight with emotion. "Yes, little wolf, I'm here. I'm right here." Kieran buried his face in her neck, and she felt his happiness radiating through their bond, like sunshine. He'd spoken. After 2 years of silence, he'd finally spoken. The nursemaid appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. Her eyes went wide. He said a word. He actually said a word. Within an hour, the entire pack house knew. By afternoon, Alpha Darius stood in the nursery doorway, watching his son with an expression that made Mara's chest ache. "Say it again, pup," Darius said softly, crouching down to Kieran's level. "Can you say, Papa?" Kieran looked at his father, then back at Mara. He pressed closer to her legs, his small hand fisting in her skirt. "Mara?" he said instead, and smiled. Something flickered across Darius's face. Hurt, maybe. Or resignation. He straightened slowly. At least he's speaking. That's good. He'll say it when he's ready. Mara offered quietly. Give him time. Darius's eyes snapped to hers, and for a moment she saw past the alpha mask to the father underneath, the man who'd spent 2 years wondering if his son would ever speak, ever connect, ever be normal. You're good with him, Darius said finally. The words sounded like they cost him something. I can't deny that. Whatever else is true, you're good with him. He left before Mara could respond, his shoulders tight with tension. That night, she heard him in his study, the room directly above hers, pacing until dawn. The sound of his footsteps was a lonely rhythm that echoed through the floorboards, and Mara found herself staring at the ceiling, wondering what kept an alpha awake in the darkest hours. By the second week, Kieran was speaking in short sentences. Simple things, mostly. Want milk? Play now? Where, Mara? But each new phrase sent ripples of shock through the pack. The child who'd been written off as possibly damaged, possibly cursed, was developing faster than any pup his age. But it wasn't just his speech. His coordination improved dramatically. His wolf instincts sharpened. And on the 14th day, he shifted completely for the first time. A perfect, controlled shift that left the pack healers speechless. Mara had been reading to him in the nursery when it happened. One moment, Kieran was a toddler curled in her lap. The next, a small grey wolf pup sat where he'd been, his tail wagging furiously. The guard at the door had run for the alpha immediately. Darius arrived to find his son in wolf form, playfully tugging at Mara's sleeve with puppy teeth that couldn't yet hurt anyone. The alpha had stared for a full minute before speaking. He's never done this before. Not a full shift. Darius's voice was rough. The partial shift at the ceremony was the first time his wolf had ever emerged at all. He's strong, Mara said, running her fingers through Kieran's soft fur. The pup made a happy yipping sound and licked her hand. He just needed, I don't know, permission maybe, safety, something that told him it was okay to let his wolf out. Darius moved closer, his eyes never leaving his son. Can he shift back? Kieran, Mara said gently, show your papa your human face. The pup looked up at her, then at Darius. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Kieran's small body shimmered, and the toddler was back, giggling at his own cleverness. Papa, Kieran said, the word bursting out of him like he'd been saving it. Papa, I did it! Darius's knees seemed to give out. He dropped to the floor, and suddenly Kieran was scrambling out of Mara's lap and throwing himself at his father. Small arms wrapped around Darius's neck, and the alpha's careful control shattered. You did it, pup, Darius whispered, his voice breaking. You did it perfectly. Mara looked away, giving them a moment of privacy. Through the nursery window, she could see the pack grounds below. Warriors training, omegas working in the gardens, the normal rhythm of pack life. But nothing about this situation was normal. When she looked back, Darius was watching her over his son's head. The expression on his face was complicated, gratitude and suspicion tangled together, along with something else she couldn't quite name. Thank you, he said quietly. The words seemed to surprise him as much as they surprised her. Mara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The memory started on the 15th night. Mara woke from a dream that felt too vivid to be just imagination. She'd been in the Luna's private chambers she'd never actually entered, watching Elena brush her long dark hair in front of an ornate mirror. But it wasn't just watching. She'd felt Elena's emotions, heard her thoughts. He doesn't see it, Elena's voice had whispered in the dream. He doesn't see how she watches him, how she circles like a predator. I have to protect him, have to protect our son. Mara jolted awake, her heart racing. The dream had felt like a memory, but it couldn't be. She'd never been in Elena's chambers, had never seen the Luna in such an intimate moment. Yet she could still smell the lavender oil Elena had used in her hair, could still feel the weight of the silver brush in her hand. The second memory came 3 nights later. This time, she dreamed of the courtship. Darius bringing Elena wildflowers from the northern meadows, his young face bright with hope and love. Elena laughing at something he'd said, her hand reaching for his. But underneath the joy, Mara felt Elena's fear. A cold, creeping dread that something was wrong, that someone was watching, that danger circled just outside the edges of happiness. She woke with tears on her face and Elena's fear still echoing in her chest. The third memory was worse. It came during the day, hitting her without warning while she was playing with Kieran in the nursery. One moment she was stacking blocks, and the next she was somewhere else entirely. The pack infirmary, Elena lying on a healer's table, her hand on her swollen belly. A healer, one Mara vaguely recognised as having retired 2 years ago, examining her with concerned eyes. "The baby is well, Luna," the healer said, "but your own health concerns me. These symptoms, the fatigue, the weakness, the episodes of confusion, they're not normal for pregnancy." "I'm fine," Elena insisted, but Mara could feel her lie, feel her terror that something was wrong with her body, wrong with her pregnancy, wrong with everything. "Luna, I'd like to run some additional tests. Check for—" "No." Elena's voice was sharp. "No more tests. I'm fine. The baby is fine." That's all that matters. But it wasn't fine. Mara could feel it in the memory. Eleanor knew she was dying, had known for months, and had kept it hidden from everyone, even Darius. Mara gasped back to reality to find Kieran staring at her with concerned eyes. "Mara sad?" he asked, his small hand patting her cheek. "No, little wolf," she lied. "Mara's fine." But she wasn't fine. The memories were coming faster now, bleeding into her waking hours. And they weren't just random moments, they were building towards something, showing her pieces of a puzzle she didn't understand. That night, she found the first note. It was slipped under her door, written in the same hand that had scrawled murderer in chicken blood. But this message was different. Stop digging, Omega. Stop asking questions. Stop trying to remember. Or you'll join the real Luna in her grave. Mara's blood ran cold. Someone knew about the memories. Someone knew she was piecing together Elena's final months. Someone was threatened by what she might discover. She burned the note in the small fireplace in her room, watching the paper curl and blacken. But she couldn't burn away the fear that had settled in her bones. The poison came on the 18th day. Mara had started taking her evening meals in the nursery, eating simple fare while Kieran played nearby. The kitchen Omega who brought her tray that night was new. A young woman with nervous eyes who set the food down without meeting Mara's gaze. The stew smelled delicious. Rich meat and herbs. Fresh bread on the side. Mara's stomach growled. She'd been too anxious to eat much lately, and the smell was intoxicating. She was lifting the spoon to her lips when Kieran suddenly went rigid. The toddler's eyes flashed gold, pure wolf gold, and a growl rumbled from his small chest. Before Mara could react, he'd shifted into his wolf form and knocked the bowl from her hands. The stew splashed across the floor, and Kieran's growls intensified. The guard burst through the door. "What's happening?" "I heard." He stopped, staring at the spilled stew, at Kieran, who was hackles raised and snarling at the puddle on the floor, at Mara, who sat frozen in shock. "Get the alpha," the guard said quietly. "Now." Within minutes, the nursery was full of people. Darius, the pack healers, Elder Thea, even Seraphina, who'd appeared with a concerned expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. The head healer knelt by the spilled stew, her hands glowing with diagnostic magic. When she looked up, her face was grim. Wolfsbane, enough to kill an Omega within minutes if she'd eaten even a single spoonful. She didn't finish the sentence. The room erupted in controlled chaos. Guards were dispatched to find the kitchen Omega. The healer began examining Mara for any contact with the poison. And Darius stood perfectly still, staring at his son. Kieran had shifted back to human form and was pressed against Mara's legs, his small body trembling. But he'd saved her. His wolf instincts had recognized the danger before anyone else. Who brought the meal? Darius's voice was dangerously quiet. New Omega, the guard reported. Arrived 3 days ago from the northern borders. Said she was looking for work. One of the kitchen staff hired her. Find her, now. But the kitchen Omega was gone. Her small room in the servants' quarters was empty. Her few belongings vanished. She'd disappeared the moment she delivered the poisoned stew, melting into the night like smoke. A hired assassin, Elder Thea said grimly. Someone paid to kill the Omega and make it look like a tragic accident. Who? Darius's question was directed at no one and everyone. Who in this pack wants a dead badly enough to hire an assassin? Serafina stepped forward, her expression perfectly sympathetic. Darling, it could be anyone. Half the pack blames her for Elena's death. It might not be a conspiracy, just someone taking matters into their own hands. But Mara saw the flash in Serafina's eyes, the brief moment of calculation before the mask of concern settled into place. She knows, Mara thought, or she's involved. This changes things, Darius said slowly. He looked at Mara, really looked at her, and she saw something shift in his expression. If someone wants you dead this badly, then maybe you're telling the truth. Maybe there is something worth killing to hide. He turned to his head guard. Double Mara's protection. No one enters or leaves her presence without my explicit permission. And I want that kitchen Omega found. I don't care if you have to track her across 3 territories, find her, and bring her back alive. Yes, Alpha. As the room cleared, Darius lingered. He looked at his son, who'd finally stopped trembling and was now holding Mara's hand with fierce determination. He saved you, Darius said quietly. His wolf knew. Somehow, he knew. The bond, Mara whispered. We're connected. If I die, he dies. His wolf recognized the threat because it was a threat to him too. Darius's jaw tightened. Then I'll make sure you don't die. Not for his sake, not for yours, for his. Whatever secrets you're hiding, whatever truth you're looking for, you're going to live long enough to find it. That's a promise. He left, and Mara was alone with Kieran and the spilled stew that had nearly killed her. That night, unable to sleep, she began searching her own memories, not Elena's memories, her own, and found nothing. She could remember the last 3 years with perfect clarity, every day of her exile, every moment of survival. But before that, before the night Elena died, there was nothing, just blank space where her past should be. She didn't remember her parents, didn't remember her childhood. Couldn't recall how she'd become a healer or why she'd been chosen to attend the Luna's birth. It was like she'd simply appeared 3 years ago, fully formed, with no history and no identity beyond what others told her. Mara sat on her small bed, staring at her hands in the darkness. Who was she? Really? Because the more she tried to remember, the more certain she became that something was terribly, impossibly wrong. In the back of her mind, where her wolf should be, she felt something stir. Not quite her wolf, but something else. Something that had been sleeping for 3 years and was finally beginning to wake. And with that awakening came a whisper of truth so horrifying that Mara almost didn't want to believe it. You're not remembering Elena's memories, the voice said. These are your memories. You just don't remember living them. The room spun. Mara pressed her hands to her head, trying to make sense of impossible thoughts. She'd been at Eleanor's birth. That was documented. She'd been the one holding Eleanor's hand when the Luna died. That was fact. But what if she'd been there in more than one way? What if the bond between her and Kieran wasn't new at all, but old, ancient, from before? Before what? Before she'd somehow become someone else? Mara didn't sleep that night. She sat in her small room watching dawn light creep across the stone walls and tried to hold on to a sense of self that kept slipping through her fingers like water. In the nursery, 3 doors down, Kieran slept peacefully. Through their bond, she could feel his dreams, happy, uncomplicated dreams of playing and running and being safe. And underneath those dreams, buried so deep that most would never notice it, she felt something else. A recognition, a certainty. Kieran's wolf knew who she was, even if Mara herself didn't understand it yet. The question was, would she survive long enough to figure it out? Or would whoever had tried to poison her succeed in burying the truth, and Mara with it, before she could piece together the impossible puzzle of her own identity? Chapter 4. The fever came on suddenly 3 days after the poisoning attempt. Mara had put Kieran down for his afternoon nap, watching him drift off with his usual contentment. When she returned an hour later, the toddler was burning up, his small body convulsing with tremors that made the bed frame rattle. "No," Mara breathed, rushing to his side. The moment her hands touched his forehead, she knew. This wasn't a normal illness. This was something darker, something that felt horribly familiar. Through their bond, she could feel Kieran's wolf thrashing in panic, unable to fight whatever was attacking his small body from the inside. "Guard!" she screamed. "Get the healers! Get the alpha! Now!" Within minutes, the nursery was chaos. The pack healers surrounded Kieran's bed, their magic flaring as they tried to diagnose the problem. But Mara could see the confusion on their faces, the growing fear. Darius burst through the door, his eyes immediately finding his son. The colour drained from his face. "What's wrong with him? What happened?" "We don't know, Alpha," the head healer said, her voice tight. "His temperature is dangerously high, but there's no infection we can detect. His wolf is in distress, fighting something, but we can't see what." "It's poison," Mara said quietly. All eyes turned to her. Not the wolfsbane from 3 nights ago. Something else. Something that's been dormant in his system, waiting. "That's impossible," the healer protested. "We've examined him daily since the assassination attempt. There's been nothing." "It's not new poison." Mara's hands were still on Kieran, and through their bond, she was seeing flashes of memory. Elena's memories. The weakness during pregnancy. The confusion. The slow creeping illness that everyone had attributed to a difficult gestation. It's old poison. From before he was born. Something his mother was given that passed into him in the womb. The room went silent. Ilara was poisoned during her pregnancy? Darius's voice was dangerous, barely controlled. "That's what you're claiming?" "I'm not claiming anything. I'm remembering." Mara met his gaze, desperate for him to understand. "The memories have been coming for weeks now. Elena, Ilara, she knew. She knew someone was poisoning her. She documented it, hid the evidence, tried to figure out who was doing it, but she ran out of time. This is insane," one of the healers muttered. "How could she possibly remember?" Kieran's small body arched off the bed, a scream tearing from his throat. The crescent mark on his neck blazed with light, and an answering fire burned on Mara's wrist. "Get back," Mara commanded, her voice carrying an authority that surprised everyone, including herself. "All of you, get back, now." The healer stumbled away and Mara pressed both hands to Kieran's chest. She closed her eyes and let herself fall fully into their bond, deeper than she'd ever gone before. The poison was there, woven through Kieran's system like black threads through white cloth. It had been dormant, held at bay by the natural magic of childhood and by the soul bond itself. But someone had activated it, a delayed trigger, set to go off at the worst possible moment. "I don't know how to fix this," Mara thought desperately. "I'm not strong enough. I don't have Elena's knowledge." But even as she thought it, something inside her shifted. Knowledge flooded her mind. Not learned, but remembered. Elena's healing magic, her techniques, her power. It was there, buried beneath 3 years of amnesia, waiting to be accessed. Mara's hands began to glow with golden light. She worked for hours. The sun set, the moon rose. And still she knelt by Kieran's bedside, pouring everything she had into purging the poison from his small body. Around her the pack watched in silence. Some had brought chairs, settling in for a vigil. Others stood, unable to look away from the impossible sight of an Omega wielding lunar-level healing magic. Darius never left his position at the foot of the bed, his eyes fixed on his son's face. Finally, as midnight approached, Kieran's fever broke. The black threads of poison dissolved under Mara's golden light, and the toddler's breathing eased. He opened his eyes, clear and aware for the first time in hours, and looked directly at Mara. "Mama," he whispered. "Not Mara, Mama." Then he slipped into natural healing sleep. Mara swayed, exhaustion crashing over her. Strong hands caught her before she could fall. Darius, moving with wolf speed to steady her. "I've got you," he said quietly. "I've got you." Mara looked up at him, at this alpha who had every reason to hate her, and saw something in his eyes that made her chest tight. Not hatred. Not anymore. "The ritual," Elder Thea said from the doorway. The ancient woman looked older than usual, her face grave. "It has to be tonight, under the full moon. We need to know the truth of what happened 3 years ago, and there's only one way to access blocked memories." "She's exhausted," Darius protested. "She needs rest. She needs answers." The elder's voice was gentle but firm. "We all do. Because if someone poisoned the Luna during her pregnancy, and that same poison nearly killed the heir tonight, then we have a traitor in this pack. Someone who's been planning this for years. And they won't stop until both Mara and Kieran are dead." Darius's arms tightened around Mara. "What kind of ritual?" "A soul walk. Ancient magic that allows someone to relive their own memories, even memories that have been blocked or taken." The elder looked at Mara. "But it's dangerous. You'll need an anchor, someone to pull you back if you get lost in the past." "I'll do it," Darius said immediately. "Alpha, you should consider—" one of the advisors started. "I'll do it," Darius repeated, his voice brooking no argument. "Whatever happened to my mate, whatever truth has been hidden, I need to see it. And if Mara gets lost in the memories, I'll bring her back." The elder nodded. "Then we begin in an hour. The moon will be at its apex. Gather the inner circle. They need to witness this." The ritual ground was the same place where the mating ceremony had been interrupted 3 weeks earlier. But tonight, the ceremonial circle looked different. Ancient runes carved into the stone glowed with silver light, and the full moon hung directly overhead like a watching eye. Mara stood in the centre of the circle, her heart hammering. Around the perimeter, the pack's inner circle had gathered. Beta families, senior warriors, the healers, the elders, and Seraphina, her beautiful face a mask of concern that didn't quite hide the calculation in her eyes. Darius stood beside Mara, close enough that their arms touched. The physical contact was necessary for the ritual. The anchor had to maintain contact with the subject, or the soul walk would fail. "Are you ready?" Elder Thea asked. "No," Mara wanted to say. She wasn't ready to relive whatever horrors were buried in her mind. Wasn't ready to remember being someone else if that's what had truly happened. But Kieran was safe in the pack house, guarded by a dozen warriors. He'd woken long enough to eat and assure everyone he felt better before falling back into healing sleep. She'd do anything to keep him safe, even face the truth about herself. "I'm ready," she said. The elder began to chant in the old language. The words rolled over Mara like water, and the runes around the circle blazed brighter. She felt Darius take her hand, his grip strong and steady. "Don't let go," he murmured. "No matter what you see, I'm right here." The world began to spin. Mara opened her eyes and found herself in the Luna's private chambers. For a moment, Disorientation swamped her. She was standing in a room she'd never entered, yet everything was familiar. The ornate mirror, the silver brush, the lavender scent in the air. Then she looked down and saw her hands. Not her small, calloused omega hands, but elegant fingers with a luna's marking ring. These are Elena's memories, she realized. I'm seeing through her eyes. The door opened, and a younger version of herself walked in. Mara, no, the other Mara, the one from 3 years ago, carried a tray of healing tea. My Luna, I brought your evening tonic, the Omega said shyly. Thank you, Mara. Elena's voice came from Mara's own throat, and the dissonance was dizzying. You're the only one I trust anymore. Mara watched herself, her other self, set down the tray and look at the Luna with concern. My Luna, you're not well. Please let me examine you properly. Let me bring in the senior healers. No. Elena's voice was sharp. Then softer. I can't trust them. I can't trust anyone except you. But why? What's happening? The memory shifted, and suddenly Mara was in the infirmary, secretly testing her own blood. She watched through Elena's eyes as the results came back positive for poison. Not enough to kill immediately, but enough to sicken. Enough to slowly drain life away. The memory shifted again. Elena in the archives, searching through ancient texts. Elena hiding documents in secret locations. Elena piecing together a conspiracy that went deeper than anyone suspected. And always, Elena's growing certainty that her son would be targeted next. That whoever was poisoning her wouldn't stop until both Luna and Air were dead. The final memory was the worst. The birthing room. Elena's body racked with pain as she laboured to bring her son into the world. The Omega Mara holding her hand. Tears streaming down her face as she poured healing magic into the Luna's failing body. But it wasn't enough. Elena was dying, and they both knew it. Mara, Elena gasped, her hand gripping the Omega's wrist with impossible strength. Mara, listen to me. There's no time. I'm dying, but Kieran, my son, needs protection, needs someone I trust absolutely. My Luna, please save your strength. Listen. Elena's eyes blazed gold. There's a spell. Forbidden magic from before the pack laws. A way to transfer essence, to pass on what I am to someone else. Part of my soul, my wolf, my memories. I can give them to you. Make you strong enough to protect my son. Make you worthy enough that the pack won't question your bond with him. No, Mara whispered. My Luna, you're asking me to... I'm dying anyway. Elena's voice was fading, but her grip remained strong. Let me die knowing my son will be protected. Let me die knowing part of me survives to watch over him. Please, Mara. You're the only one I trust. The only one pure enough to receive this gift without corruption. But what about me? What happens to me? The spell will cloud your memories, make you forget who you were, blend your identity with mine, until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. Elena's breathing was laboured now. You'll be blamed for my death, exiled. It's the only way to keep you alive while making the real traitor think they've won. But the bond, the soul bond with Kieran, that will remain. When the time is right, when he needs you, the bond will call you back. I don't understand. Promise me. Eleanor's grip tightened one final time. Promise me you'll protect my son, no matter what, no matter who you have to become. And the Omega Mara, with tears streaming down her face, had nodded. I promise. The spell had begun immediately. Elena's body had glowed with golden light, and that light had flowed into Mara through their joined hands. The Omega had screamed as foreign memories poured into her mind, as a second soul took root beside her own, as her wolf transformed into something more. When it was over, Elena had taken her last breath with a smile on her face, and Mara had woken hours later with no memory of who she'd been before, marked with a crescent that bound her to a child she didn't consciously remember promising to protect. The memory released Mara with a gasp. She was back in the ritual circle, Darius's hand still gripping hers, but she could see from his face that he'd witnessed everything. The soul walk had shown them both the truth. Around the circle, the inner pack members stood in shocked silence. They'd seen it too. The ritual had projected Elena's memories for all to witness. "It's true," one of the elder warriors whispered. "The Luna performed the forbidden soul transfer." "She knew," another said. "She knew someone was poisoning her." Darius's face had gone pale. "Who?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Who was poisoning my mate?" "Someone she trusted," Mara said, her voice hoarse. Elena's memories were settling into place now, clicking together with her own fragmented recollections. Someone close enough to have regular access to her food, her quarters. Someone who could poison her slowly over months without arousing suspicion. The beta female, Elder Thea said grimly. Seraphina's mother. She was in charge of the Luna's household staff. She had access to everything. All eyes turned to Seraphina, who stood at the edge of the circle. For a moment, her perfect mask held. Then slowly, she smiled. "Clever," Seraphina said, and her voice had lost all pretense of warmth. "Very clever. Mother always said Elena was too smart for her own good. That's why the poison had to be so subtle, so slow. Give her time to suspect, to investigate, but not enough time to prove anything or identify the source. You admit it?" Darius's voice was deadly quiet. "You admit your mother murdered my mate?" "My mother did what was necessary for the good of the pack." Seraphina's smile widened. Elena was weak. She questioned the old alliances, wanted to change pack laws that had stood for centuries. She was making us vulnerable. So yes, Mother poisoned her. And yes, we let the Omega take the blame. It was all working perfectly. "Until the soul transfer," Mara said, pieces clicking into place. "Elena outsmarted you. She gave me enough of herself to protect Kieran, and she knew eventually the truth would come out." A minor complication. Seraphina waved a dismissive hand. "We simply had to wait for you to die of natural causes or accidents. The bond would have died with you, and Kieran would have been vulnerable again. But you proved surprisingly difficult to kill. The assassination attempt. Darius's hands were shaking with barely controlled rage. That was you. Of course it was me." Seraphina's eyes glittered with malice. "And the poison in Kieran's system. That was insurance. Mother gave it to Elena during her pregnancy, a delayed trigger that would activate when the child reached his 3rd year. We just needed to wait a bit longer." "Why?" The word tore from Darius's throat. "Why kill my son? Why kill Elena? What could possibly be worth—" "Power." The voice came from behind Seraphina, and the crowd parted to reveal an older woman with Seraphina's sharp features. The former beta female stepped into the circle, flanked by several warriors who wore unfamiliar pack markings. "The Blackridge pack offered us true power, Alpha. An alliance through marriage that would make us the strongest territory in 3 regions. All we had to do was remove Elena and her weak-blooded heir." "Mother, don't—" Seraphina started. "Oh, it's too late for caution now." The beta female smiled coldly. "They know everything anyway. Yes, we poisoned Elena. Yes, we planned to kill the boy. And yes, we've been working with Blackridge for years. They're here now, actually, waiting just beyond your borders with 300 warriors. All we need is for Seraphina to complete the mating bond with you, and they'll stand down. Refuse, and they'll attack. Your choice, Alpha." The circle erupted. Warriors drew weapons, healers began defensive spells, and chaos descended. But through it all, Mara felt something awakening inside her. The lunar essence that Eleanor had passed to her, dormant for 3 years, was finally waking fully. She'd used fragments of it to heal Kieran, but this was different. This was the full power of a true Luna, rising to protect her pack. Her pack. Golden light exploded from Mara's body, so bright that everyone was forced to shield their eyes. When they looked back, Mara stood at the center of the circle, her eyes glowing pure gold, and power rolling off her in waves. "No," she said, and her voice carried Eleanor's authority blended with her own strength. "You will not harm this pack. You will not touch my son, and you will not threaten my mate." The words hung in the air. My son. My mate. Serafina lunged forward, a knife appearing in her hand as if from nowhere, but she never reached Mara. Darius moved like lightning, catching Serafina's wrist and twisting until the blade clattered to the stone. "My mate," he repeated, his eyes finding Mara's across the circle. "Yes, that's exactly what she is." Serafina's mother made a run for the edge of the circle, but pack warriors blocked her path. The Blackridge fighters who'd infiltrated tried to aid her, but they were outnumbered and overwhelmed within moments. Elder Thea raised her staff, and binding magic wrapped around the conspirators like silver chains. "Serafina of Silvercrest, former beta female Margaret, and all those who conspired with you, you are hereby charged with treason, murder and attempted murder of pack royalty. The sentence is exile with marking, so that no pack will ever take you in." "Wait." The small voice came from the pack house entrance. Everyone turned to see Kieran standing there, supported by his nursemaid. The toddler looked weak but determined, his grey eyes fixed on Mara. He walked slowly across the grounds, toward the ritual circle, and the crowd parted before him instinctively. When he reached Mara, he held up his arms in the universal gesture of a child wanting to be held. Mara scooped him up immediately, holding him close. The crescent marks on both their bodies blazed with light, brighter than ever before. "Mama came back," Kieran said clearly, his small hand touching Mara's cheek. "My first mama had to go away, but she came back differently, so I could have a mama again." Tears streamed down Mara's face. "Yes, little wolf, your mama came back." "The marks know," Kieran continued, speaking with a wisdom beyond his years, or perhaps with Elena's wisdom shared through the bond. "Mama Elena gave Mara her love, gave her the power to protect me, made Mara my new mama so I wouldn't be alone." He looked at his father with those ancient grey eyes. "Papa's mate came back too. Not the same, but still his. Still ours." Darius stood frozen, staring at his son and the woman who held him. The woman who carried pieces of his lost love, but was wholly herself. The woman who'd sacrificed everything to protect a child who wasn't born hers, but had become hers through magic and love and impossible circumstance. "I condemned you," Darius said hoarsely, moving toward them. "I blamed you, exiled you, hated you, and all along you were protecting my son, carrying my mate's essence, suffering to keep your promise." "I didn't remember," Mara whispered. "I didn't know what I'd promised until—" "But you kept the promise anyway." Darius reached out, his hand hovering near her face, but not quite touching. "Even without memories, even in exile, you answered when Kieran called. You knew, somewhere deep inside, that he was yours to protect." "He is mine to protect," Mara said firmly. Through the lunar essence, through the memories she now fully possessed, she understood what Elena had truly given her. Not just power or knowledge, but purpose, identity, a place to belong. "And so is this pack? So are you." Darius's hand finally made contact, cupping her cheek with infinite gentleness. "Then accept me. Accept the bond that Elena meant for you to complete. Be my mate, my Luna, my son's mother, not because you carry Elena's soul, but because you've earned that place through your own strength." "The pack," Mara started. "The pack will accept what I declare." Darius turned to face the assembled wolves, his arm sliding around Mara's waist while she held Kieran. "Mara has proven herself beyond any doubt. She carries lunar essence through the forbidden soul transfer, magic so ancient and powerful that most of us thought it was legend. She's bonded to my son as truly as any birth mother. She survived exile, assassination attempts, and 3 years of suffering to keep a promise she didn't even consciously remember making. If that doesn't make someone worthy of being Luna, then nothing does. Elder Thea stepped forward, her old face creased with a smile. Then let us complete what was interrupted. The mating ceremony can wait. That's between the two of you. But the Luna ceremony, the claiming of your role as this pack's mother and protector, that needs to happen now, tonight, under the full moon that witnessed both Eleanor's death and your rebirth. Mara looked down at Kieran, who smiled up at her with absolute trust. Then at Darius, who watched her with an expression that made her heart race. Not just duty or gratitude, but the beginning of something deeper. Yes, she said. I accept. The ceremony was brief but powerful. Elder Thea called upon the moon goddess to witness as Mara knelt at the centre of the circle. The pack surrounded them, and even those who had doubted her seemed moved by the magnitude of what was happening. Do you accept the responsibility of Luna, the elder asked, to protect this pack, to guide them, to sacrifice yourself for their well-being if necessary? I accept, Mara said clearly. Do you accept Kieran as your son in all ways that matter, to raise him, protect him, and love him as your own? I accept. Her voice broke on the words. I already do. Then rise, Luna Mara of Silvercrest, rise and claim your place. As Mara stood, Darius moved to her side. Without ceremony, without waiting for tradition, he pulled her close and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was brief but searing, a promise of what was to come. When they broke apart, Darius's hand moved to her throat, the traditional place for an alpha's mark. Not yet, Mara breathed. Let's do this right. Court me, Alpha. Let me remember how to be a person again, not just a protector or a vessel for someone else's memories. Give us time to know each other. Darius smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. As my Luna commands. He turned to the bound conspirators. His smile vanished, replaced by cold alpha authority. Seraphina, Margaret, and all who betrayed this pack. You are exiled with full marking. Your wolves will be bound, preventing you from ever shifting again. You will be escorted to the far borders and released with nothing. If you ever return, if you ever threaten my pack or my family again, I will kill you myself. As the traitors were dragged away, Seraphina's eyes met Mara's one final time. You haven't won, she spat. Blackridge won't stop. They'll come for you eventually. Let them come, Mara said quietly, and she felt Eleanor's fierce protectiveness surge through her, blending with her own newfound strength. Let anyone who threatens my family come. They'll learn what happens when you make a mother defend her child. The warning in her voice made Seraphina pale, and she said nothing more as she was taken away. As the crowd dispersed, Mara found herself standing with Darius and Kieran under the full moon. The child had fallen asleep against her shoulder, exhausted by the night's events. What happens now? Mara asked softly. Darius looked at her, really looked at her, seeing not his dead mate's ghost or an Omega he'd wronged, but a woman who'd earned her place through fire and sacrifice. Now, he said quietly, now we heal, we rebuild, we become the family that Kieran deserves. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. And when you're ready, when we both are, we complete the bond properly, not because of duty or magic or anyone's expectations, but because we choose each other. Mara leaned into his touch, feeling Kieran's sleepy warmth between them and the pack's acceptance settling around her like a cloak. She'd lost herself 3 years ago and become someone new, but maybe that was exactly what was supposed to happen. Maybe Eleanor had known that Mara needed to be broken down and rebuilt into someone strong enough to be Luna, wise enough to be a mother, and brave enough to complete what Eleanor herself had started. Thank you, Mara whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to Darius, Eleanor, or the moon goddess herself. Perhaps all three. As they walked back toward the pack house together, Alpha, Luna, and Air, the crescent marks on Mara's wrist and Kieran's neck glowed in perfect synchronization, a reminder of an impossible bond and a promise kept. Behind them, the full moon watched over Silvercrest Pack, bearing witness to the end of one story and the beginning of another. Epilogue, 6 months later. The spring flowers were in full bloom when Mara woke to find Kieran standing beside her bed, his small face pressed close to hers. "Mama," he whispered urgently. "Mama, wake up. The butterflies are here." Mara smiled, her eyes still closed. "Are they, little wolf?" "Lots of them." "Papa says we can go see." A pause, then hopefully, "Can we bring breakfast outside?" She opened her eyes to find her son's face lit with excitement. At nearly 3 years old, Kieran was thriving in ways that still amazed everyone who'd known him before. He spoke in full sentences now, laughed easily, and had become the pack house's most enthusiastic explorer. "Let me guess," Mara said, sitting up. "You've already been to the kitchens and convinced them to pack a basket." Kieran's guilty grin was all the answer she needed. 20 minutes later, Mara found herself in the northern meadow, the same place where Darius had once brought Eleanor wildflowers during their courtship. The memory didn't hurt anymore. She'd learned to carry Eleanor's experiences alongside her own, 2 lives woven together but distinct. Darius was already there, laying out a blanket under the ancient oak tree. He looked up as they approached, and the warmth in his eyes made Mara's heart skip. "Good morning, Luna," he said, pulling her close for a kiss that still made her knees weak even after months of courtship. "And good morning to my favourite negotiator." Kieran beamed, already distracted by a butterfly that had landed on a nearby flower. "Papa, look." "A blue one." They settled on the blanket, and Mara watched Kieran chase butterflies with the careful supervision of 2 guards who'd been assigned to shadow the air. The warriors had softened considerably over the past months. She'd caught them teaching Kieran tracking skills and sneaking him extra sweets more than once. "The council wants to schedule the mating ceremony," Darius said quietly, his fingers laced through Mara's. "Elder Thea says the autumn equinox would be auspicious." Mara's heart fluttered. They'd been courting properly, taking time to know each other without the weight of crisis and conspiracy. She'd learned that Darius hummed off-key when he was working, that he had a weakness for honeycakes, and that he still sometimes woke in the night reaching for someone who was gone. But more importantly, she'd learned that the man who'd exiled her in grief and anger was also capable of tremendous gentleness, of admitting when he was wrong, and of loving with a fierceness that took her breath away. "Autumn," she repeated. "That gives us time to prepare, and for you to be absolutely certain." Darius turned to face her fully. "Mara, I've been certain since the night you stood in that ritual circle and declared Kieran yours. Since I watched you fight for our pack with lunar power, you barely understood. Since I realized that the woman I was falling in love with wasn't a shadow of my past, but the promise of my future." Tears pricked Mara's eyes. "I'm not her, you know. Even with Elena's memories, even with part of her soul, I'm still me, still the Omega who used to live in a shack and survive on scraps." "I know." Darius cupped her face gently. "And I love you for exactly who you are. The courage that made you reach for a screaming child, despite knowing it might cost you your life. The stubbornness that kept you alive through exile. The love that made you protect a son you didn't remember promising to guard. That's all you, Mara. That's who I choose." Before she could respond, Kieran came running back, his hands cupped carefully. "Mama, Papa, look, I caught one." He opened his small hands to reveal a monarch butterfly, its wings opening and closing slowly. The child's face was alight with wonder. "She's beautiful," Mara said softly. "But you know what happens if we keep her?" Kieran's face fell. She'll be sad? Very sad. Butterflies need to be free to fly. The toddler looked at the butterfly, then up at his parents. Slowly, he opened his hands fully. The monarch sat on his palm for a moment longer, then took flight, dancing upward into the spring air. Goodbye, butterfly, Kieran called after it. Then he turned back to Mara with a serious expression. Like Mama Eleanor, she couldn't stay, but she made sure I had you instead, so I wouldn't be sad. Mara's throat tightened. They'd been careful about explaining Elena to Kieran, trying to honour both the mother who died for him and the reality of his soul bond with Mara. But somehow the child understood it with a clarity that defied his young age. That's right, little wolf, she managed. Kieran climbed into her lap, nestling against her chest the way he'd done since that first night at the ceremony. Through their bond, Mara felt his contentment, his security, his absolute certainty that he was loved and safe. The pack wanted me to give you this, Darius said, pulling a small wooden box from his pocket. They commissioned it specially, said it was time. Mara opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside was a silver pendant, a crescent moon cradling a small wolf pup. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each detail perfect. It's the pack's official acceptance, Darius explained quietly. A Luna's pendant, given only when every member of the pack agrees the choice is right. Even the families who doubted you at first. They see now what you've done for Kieran, for me, for all of us. Mara traced the pendant with one finger, overwhelmed. 6 months ago, she'd been the pack's most despised member. Now, help me put it on, she asked. Darius fastened the chain around her neck, his fingers lingering on her skin. When Mara touched the pendant, she felt it. The pack bonds, hundreds of threads connecting her to every wolf in Silvercrest. Some were thin still, tentative, but they were there, real, growing stronger every day. Mama's pretty, Kieran announced, then spotted another butterfly and scrambled off her lap to chase it. He's right, Darius murmured, pulling Mara back against his chest, though I prefer breathtaking. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son play. Guards kept a respectful distance, and overhead the spring sun warmed the meadow where Elena had once walked with her first love. Do you think she knows? Mara asked quietly. Elena, do you think she can see him happy? I think, Darius said carefully, that she knew exactly what she was doing when she chose you. She saw something in that Omega healer, a strength and a love that could protect her son better than anyone else. And I think wherever she is, she's at peace knowing Kieran has you. And you? Mara turned to look at him. Are you at peace? Darius smiled, really smiled, and Mara realized how rare that expression had been 6 months ago. How grief had carved lines into his face that were finally beginning to smooth. I'm more than at peace, he said. I'm happy, truly happy, maybe for the first time since. He trailed off, then started again. I loved Elena. Part of me will always love her. But you, Mara, you're not a replacement or a shadow. You're something entirely new, something I never expected to find again. And yes, I'm at peace. More than I ever thought possible. A commotion from the pack house caught their attention. Elder Thea was making her way across the grounds, moving faster than usual despite her age. Alpha, Luna, she called. Wonderful news. They stood as she approached, Darius instinctively moving to support the old woman's elbow. The Blackridge pack, Thea panted slightly. They've sued for peace. Officially, sent an emissary this morning with tribute and apologies for Seraphina's schemes. Apparently, their new Alpha, the old one died in a challenge, wants to rebuild proper alliances. Mara felt tension she hadn't realized she was carrying finally release. For months they'd been braced for retaliation, for Blackridge to make good on their threats. Warriors had been doubled at the borders, defensive spells strengthened. They want peace? Darius sounded skeptical. More than that, they want to attend your mating ceremony. Show the other packs that Silvercrest has their full support. Thea's eyes twinkled. I think they're terrified of our new Luna, actually. Word has spread about what happened at the ritual, about the soul transfer and the Luna power you wield. No one wants to cross a Luna who's been literally blessed by her predecessor. Mara laughed, surprising herself. I'm not that frightening. You dissolved poison with golden light and declared you'd destroy anyone who threatened your child, Thea said dryly. In lunar circles, that's quite frightening indeed. Kieran returned then, having apparently exhausted his butterfly-chasing energy. He climbed onto Darius's shoulders with practiced ease, his small hands tangling in his father's hair. Are we having a party? He asked hopefully. I heard the word ceremony. We are, Darius confirmed, reaching up to steady his son. In autumn, your mama and I are going to complete our mating bond. And then you'll have the mark? Kieran touched his own neck where the crescent moon still glowed faintly under his skin. Like mine? Something like that, Mara said softly. Good. Kieran nodded with a child's absolute certainty. Then everyone will know Mama is ours forever. Elder Thea smiled at the scene. Alpha, Luna, and Air together in the spring meadow. I'll leave you to your breakfast, but Luna Mara, when you have time, I'd like to discuss your training. There are aspects of lunar magic that Elena never fully explored. With your unique situation, you might be capable of things we've only read about in the oldest texts. After she left, Mara settled back on the blanket with Darius and Kieran. The basket the kitchen staff had packed was full of treats. Honey cakes, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, and sweet cream for Kieran. As they ate, the spring breeze carried the scent of flowers and new growth. Around them the packed land stretched green and peaceful. Safe. Protected. Mara watched her son, because he was fully hers now, in every way that mattered, laugh at something his father said. She felt the soul bond humming contentedly in her chest, and beneath that, the pack bonds connecting her to hundreds of wolves who'd finally accepted her as their Luna. It wasn't the life she would have chosen if anyone had asked her 3 years ago. The Omega healer, who lived in a shack at the pack's edge, would never have imagined this. A family, a purpose, a place of honor and love. But maybe that was the point. Maybe Elena had seen what Mara herself couldn't see. That the quiet Omega, with no family and no status, had everything necessary to be a Luna. She just needed to be broken down and rebuilt to discover it. What are you thinking about? Darius asked, his hand finding hers. How far we've come, Mara said softly. How much has changed? Any regrets? She looked at him, this alpha who'd condemned her in grief, and then fought his way back to her with patience and love. Then at Kieran, who was currently trying to balance a piece of bread on his nose. Then down at the crescent pendant that marked her as Luna, and the faint glow of her soul bond visible on her wrist. Not a single one, she said, and as Darius leaned in to kiss her, as Kieran giggled and demanded attention. As the spring butterflies danced around them in the meadow where 2 Lunas had once walked, Mara felt Elena's presence like a blessing. Thank you, she thought, sending the words to wherever Elena's spirit had gone. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for giving me this family, this pack, this life. I'll protect him, protect them all, with everything I am. The breeze picked up, warm and gentle, carrying the scent of lavender, and Mara could have sworn she heard Elena's voice whisper back, I know you will. That's why I chose you. Kieran tugged on her sleeve. Mama, Papa says after breakfast we can go to the lake. Can we? Please? Mara looked at Darius, who shrugged with a smile. The Luna's schedule is her own today. What do you say? She gathered her son close, feeling Darius's arm come around both of them, and let herself simply be happy. Simply be present in this perfect moment. No threats looming, no mysteries to solve, no battles to fight. Just a family, together in the spring sunshine, with all the time in the world, to build their future. Yes, Mara said, pressing a kiss to Kieran's dark hair. We can go to the lake. And as they packed up their breakfast and headed toward new adventures, the crescent marks on mother and son glowed softly in the morning light, eternal proof of a bond that transcended death, defied tradition, and transformed an exiled Omega into the Luna she was always meant to be. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share, and subscribe for more.